Hey, Evolve with Emily family. I just wanted to let you guys know that I'm editing the show right now, and unfortunately, we lost about a third of the video footage. Audio is pristine, and we have some good video clips in there, so I'll probably still end up posting it. Honestly, everyone listens, not many people watch it, but I just wanted to give you a little courtesy heads up. If you do happen to watch a YouTube channel, there are some of you that watch the YouTube channel. So yeah, just wanted to give you the heads up. I will not let that happen again. So upset about it, but I'm not really that upset because I'm editing with the most beautiful view behind me. Check it out. How can you be mad when you got to work with a view like that and cuddles like this? Hope you guys enjoy the show. It really is an incredible episode. And yeah, I've been really loving what I do. I've been loving these interviews. I have the best interviews. 2023, by hands down, by far, the best interviews. So truly, I hope that you guys enjoy them. I hope that you're subscribed to the show. And I hope that you will do me a favor and share the show, because that is the only way the show grows. I got quite shadow banned in 2022 and 2021 for sharing the truth, which is now science. But anyways, that's a whole different episode. Sit back, relax, enjoy the episode. Bye, guys. Welcome to the Evolve with Emily show. I'm your host, Emily Hayden, and today I am here for an in-person interview, if you guys are watching on YouTube, which I'm so excited about, with best-selling author and confidence coach, Janelle Lynnae. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I am pumped to be here.
I am really excited to dive in today. I am a little bit of a procrastinator, I'm not going to lie. I feel like people don't think that because I'm a very I achieve a lot of things. I'm a very high performer type of person, but I realized that I perform really well under pressure and I kind of like it. So all that to say, I finished your book this morning.
Let's go.
I was reading the last bit of it this morning and I was like, I have to finish.
I did see that you got into my email list for the 30.
Oh, you saw that?
Yeah. I was like, oh, I see Emily Hayden just slide it into the email list.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. They always say, don't judge a book by its cover, right? Mm-hmm. And I somehow still do that sometimes, meaning sometimes I even look at the book. I'm like, okay, a book about confidence. And then you get in there and you get to the real deep stuff. And you're like, oh, I had no idea that this is what we would be talking about. And let me tell you what, this book may have just been for me, but maybe it's for some of my listeners as well. Truly, I was crying this morning reading your book and I was like, do I tell her that I was crying? Yes, we tell her.
Yes.
So truthfully, before we even get started, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much. I know you had so much fear, so many limiting beliefs that you share in the book about, should I even write this book? Should I put these words down on paper? And it's interesting because it's the words that you're writing down, nothing is this, groundbreaking new thing. And I think that's something that holds us back from releasing what we have inside. Mm. But man, let me tell you what, the right words spoken at the right time in black and white ink on paper, hitting the person that needs to receive it is everything. It's everything. Even you just having these, simple statements of your life matters. You were on purpose, created by your creator. It's a simple thing to say, but when it hits, it hits. And I'm just so thankful that you were brave enough to put this into words and onto paper. So thank you, true gratitude for you.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. It's like everyone who's listening is hearing, I definitely experienced a lot of imposter syndrome, writing it of oh, well, I'm not good enough yet. And that's exactly what I coach women on. So it's just isn't it so funny how it's we, constantly take our own advice and, yeah, it was a labor of love for sure. And I poured, I think about how many times I was bawling as I was writing it, just pouring my heart into it and being oh my gosh, kind of actually same thing as what you just shared of me being should I actually share that? And I imagining what's so interesting about writing a book, to be honest, for anyone who's curious about writing a book ever, maybe yourself, right? Mm-hmm. It is thinking about all the different readers who will be reading the book and what their perception might be. So if you a lot of times in business, you have an ideal client and you create all your content with that one client in mind. And so that's a lot more controlled. And with a book, you have no, my grandpa might read it, my mom, my dad, my cousins. And then I think about my husband and his company, a lot of people at his company I'm close with. So his boss bought my book, and thinking about all of his coworkers then reading it. And the things that I'm sharing in there of laying under my bed, trying to like cut my wrist, crying in high school, like thinking about the different characters who will all be reading that is honestly one of the most vulnerable things I think that I've ever done in my life. Just being like transparent is that it's really scary. Like right before the book was about to come out, I was like, I should take this out and 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 this out because I don't want the whole world to know these things about me. It's like so intimate and so crazy. And again, if there's just a few people who knew, I'd be okay. You know, this certain like you, I'm like, oh, well, that's a little bit more comfortable for me to think about you reading it, you know, but like some of those other people, it's interesting. It's a really kind of a crazy dynamic.
It's interesting because in the book, I remember, you know, I'm reading this moment that I'm really connecting with. And it's a moment that I'm like, to me, I'm like, it's the most important part of the book. And then right after reading it on paper, you're like, I literally almost took this out while editing. Like you shared that this was the part that you almost took out while editing the book. And I just thought to myself, I was like, oh my gosh, like it would be missing so much like gold and so much of the heart of this message if it didn't include these really hard parts. And, you know, I know what that's like. I've put out programs and podcasts and things like that before where you're like, oh, I shouldn't add this thing. And it's like the very thing that people end up connecting to. So yeah, I just think it's incredible how the things that sometimes we are most fearful of, like true vulnerability, are the things that create like the deepest connections and the most amount of change in people's lives. And one thing that stood out to me at the beginning of the book when you were sharing all these limiting beliefs that you were having, like, you know, it's too saturated. Why are people going to read my book? Well, what if only 7 people buy it? Like all these things, right? Which are very real things. And it was interesting because the shift that you shared, I think, is so helpful. And you shared a shift that maybe it's not all about you. And maybe it's not all about the business success or the success that you have in your mind of the book, but maybe it's about the person on the receiving end of it. So can you speak to that a little bit in regards to people who maybe feel fearful about a service that they're putting out, a product that they're putting out, and they maybe have these like crazy expectations for what they want it to be? And, you know, what are your thoughts on that and thoughts on it being a success or not?
Yeah, it is interesting when we release our ego and make it less about us and make it more about the people who actually need our message. And it can even be easy to be like, well, who am I to, you know, release this message? Like no one's going to listen to me anyway. But I think that's the whole thing about vulnerability is that if you're willing to be vulnerable and willing to put yourself out there, like I have a client right now who she's on a health journey herself and she's, you know, losing weight and she's doing a lot of the like, it's she's not using NutriSense, but it's like what NutriSense does where it's like you're tracking your, glucose. So the glucose, the constant continual glucose monitoring, that's what it's called. So she has that, she's on this whole journey, learning about her glucose. She like is super, super into it. And she works in, like a science type fields is like what her career is. But she has been sharing how she's like not super happy there in our coaching, but kind of has felt pigeonholed because she got all this like career and education around it. You know, she's already spent thousands of, like she's still paying off her student loans, you know? Right. So it's like, it's so hard to envision like shifting and changing and things like that. But when we've uncovered more and more of what she's passionate about, she's really passionate about holistic nutrition, especially because it's like the journey she's on right now with herself, right? Isn't that how it often is? It's like the pain that we've been through is often what propels our purpose. But that's what makes it even more vulnerable, right? Because it would be easier for her to choose something that hasn't been painful or even, I mean, even currently, right? Like that's the thing is like, it might be easy to do if you're fully moved on from all pain and you're like pretty much detached from like, you know, you're like, that was so long ago. That was like 20 years ago. Okay, cool. I'm good to talk about it now, you know?
Totally.
But it's still her journey. Like it's still a pain point. There's still a lot of vulnerability in it. And so anyway, so like one of her homework items for this week is to start a TikTok and to share her journey. And she's like, you know, she's like, she messaged me earlier and was like, I tried to film my TikTok last night and, you know, it's like, I'm really nervous and I don't like talking to the camera and maybe social media isn't for me. And, you know, all those limiting beliefs that are popping up, you know? And so we're diving into those like, okay, what's coming up for you? And so to bring it back to what you're saying, it's not about you. like she doesn't realize, because I think like one of her limiting beliefs in this situation is that, you know, she hasn't lost all the weight yet, right? Like she's seen some results and she knows a lot more than a lot of other people, but she's not where she wants to be yet. So then she feels like, who am I to teach people on TikTok about, you know, glucose monitoring and what I'm learning about my journey through that and weight loss, like if I haven't even really lost all the weight yet. And that's, you know, what I talk about in my book is that I'm like, well, I'm not a millionaire yet. And I only have 11,000 followers on Instagram. Right. But what's so funny is like, then someone with, someone with more like 100,000 followers could be like, well, I don't have enough followers. Like, because you keep putting it on a, like some,
it's the dangling carrot.
Yes. It's like something far in the future.
Yep.
But ultimately, again, if you just take away, if you stop thinking about yourself and stop thinking about like how cool you look or not cool you look, and you just start thinking about like, there's someone on the other end of this, you know, whether it's TikTok or if you're writing a book or whatever project it might be, maybe it's just having a loving conversation with a family member or a friend, but there's someone else on the receiving end that needs to hear what you have to say. And you'll be doing them a disservice if you actually don't share what you have, because you have something inside of you. Yeah, you might not be there yet. You maybe haven't reached it, you know, which I don't know, like, do we ever really like get there? Do we ever really like reach this end? Because once you've reached one goal, you set the next one and then the next, you know, and so it's kind of this constant journey of feeling confident in who you are, even with your imperfections, even with your flaws, even with your, I'm seeing this gap of where I am right now and where I want to be. There's a gap, and that gap can be very frustrating when you have big dreams and you're like, I just want to be there already. Like, I just see this future so clearly. I'm visualizing it all the time. I know that's what's in store for me, but I'm not there yet. And that's like, can be so frustrating to keep looking at that gap and yet still loving yourself and being like, I'm so proud of you. Yeah. I'm celebrating myself.
And there's so much beauty in that. There's so much beauty in embracing where you currently are, the imperfections and all, because every single person has imperfections. Like we are all the same in that way. And you embracing yours gives somebody the permission, the ability to embrace theirs as well. And I know, you know, from just personal experience, I've done a lot of documenting online. I have a YouTube channel. I used to share my entire fitness journey, a lot of my life online. And what I learned in that is that by simply sharing what I was doing and documenting my life, I took off the pressure to need to be this like expert, right? We have all these like experts online and everyone's creating this facade of what they are, whether it's like I'm a business coach and yet they like don't actually have a real business, right? Like we can put any facade on, we can create any image we want on social media. There are literal companies that teach you how to create a message and this like essentially this like mask that you can put on. So you can literally be whoever you want to be essentially. And to some people, maybe that seems empowering, but to others, when you're putting on a fake mask, when that is not the authentic version of you, that can be the most loneliest feeling in the world. And what it also does is now you have these people that are authentic, but they're looking online and they're comparing themselves to these inauthentic versions that don't even exist. And now they're feeling like they can't show up because they're not this expert when they're comparing themselves to an expert that doesn't exist.
That's not even an expert.
So, you know, I digress, but I just share that to say, especially to that client, right? There's so much beauty in you showing up in the process of it, of you showing up saying, I'm still figuring it out. Here's what I'm doing today. And then tomorrow you show up and say, hey, so I actually learned that wasn't the best way. Like, here's what I learned. This works way better for me. Tell me what works for you, you know, and really adopting this student mentality of life. And I feel like when you can do that, it really relieves you of the pressure to have to be this like perfect put together person that no one truly is behind closed doors.
Yeah. So I mean, what I really feel like it comes down to is vulnerability, right? And just like I was telling you right before this whole, you know, before we press record about my course launch, you know, for those of you who don't know, I just launched a brand new course called Confident Life Academy. And it was an 8-day launch. And in the first couple days, I only had one sale. And I was literally like bawling. I was like, everyone hates Confident Life Academy. I just spent the last 5 months like pouring my heart and soul into this. And so there was a couple people that I had brand ambassadors. I had about 10 brand ambassadors in place. And they're all like reaching out to me, like, I'm sharing it with all my friends and family. And they're like, how are you feeling? How's it going? You know? And they think I'm going to be like, it's great. Oh my gosh. But really, I was like, you know, I kept it 100. And I think that that's where like people are more inspired by like people who are willing to actually keep things real and honest on the journey. And so like with one of my clients, I was like, you know, real talk, like I had a meltdown today and I was crying and I haven't had as many sales as I thought I would. And then it was just hilarious because the doors were closing at midnight last night and I had 12 people come in just in the last 2 hours alone. So I ended up having 28 students total join, which was just so fun and so amazing for our very first launch. But I'm just laughing because I think it could be so easy for me to say like, everything's awesome and because that's what I want to say, right? I want people to think everything's awesome. But the reality is that like, you got to share the journey and then people are more inspired. Like people are like, wow, okay, wait. So it's okay to hit like rock bottom or it's okay to have like a hard day. It's okay to cry and still keep going and then have a success story on the other end of that.
It just makes you more real and more relatable as well. Like, I don't know anyone in the coaching business or as an entrepreneur that has done every launch and had successful launches every launch, or that hasn't felt like it flopped in the beginning and at the end it pulled through. Like when you told your story, I was like, yep, same. Like me too. I've literally been there. I know exactly how that feels. And if anything, it just like, it feels nice to know that you're human too, right? Because people could probably look at your Instagram and you are beautiful. You live in this beautiful home. You have a beautiful husband. You guys have this beautiful life together. And they could probably look and just think like, wow, obviously she's a confidence coach because her life is perfect. And why would she not be confident, right? But you did not start there. And that's what I love about your book is it really gives much more of a full picture of why you got to where you're at today. And I actually want to start with in the introduction, I want to read a little part of it and then we'll get into it a little bit. So this is from her book in the introduction, page 4. Says, for the longest time, I didn't have the results I wanted in most areas of my life. I wasn't happy in my romantic relationships or in my career path. I didn't really think my life mattered. Oof, hard stop. Like imagine a lot of people that are listening to this right now and they feel the same. They genuinely feel like their life doesn't matter. So I'll continue reading. I accepted the mediocrity. When I learned about the power of my mind, it was a huge shift because I realized I get to literally choose my own reality. Boom, mind blown. Everything started to change around me. I broke up with my boyfriend of 6 years. I moved to California by myself without a job. I drastically shifted my career path and I changed my finances. I started taking action on my life because I finally realized that my life actually mattered. I gave myself permission to dream big. And the result is that now I'm living this magical life I've always wanted to. I have to pinch myself sometimes because it's hard to believe that this is my reality. For so long, I felt incredibly undeserving of a life like this. So now people have come back to reality, right? Before they looked you up on Instagram, they saw this beautiful life, and yet they don't realize that the version of them that's listening right now, that may be the person that just got broken up with, or maybe they broke up with somebody and they're living alone and, you know, they're thinking about making these big career changes. You know, how could you go back and speak to that version of yourself that is feeling all of this fear, that knows she needs to end a relationship that's not for her, that knows that she needs to make a big change in her life and career? Like, what could you say to her to empower her to take action? Like, what is that thing that finally got you to take action and start taking control of your own life?
So powerful. You're an amazing host,
Aww.
Emily. Like I'm watching you. I'm like, you are literally in your lane. You're thriving.
That's so sweet. Thank you so much.
You're
I received that.
Yes, I mean it. I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give is to trust your gut. For so long, I didn't trust my gut. And there were dreams that I had that would like pop up here and there, but I would be like, no, you can't do that. And like, that's unrealistic. And honestly, a lot of people told me that too, you know, and that kind of sucks, especially like when it comes to meeting someone that you're like really excited to be with. I was with that guy for 6 years. And while he was a really nice guy, he was a good guy. There was nothing wrong. In fact, sometimes I would pray and be like, I wish he would cheat on me, or I wish he would do something bad, so I actually have an excuse to break up with him. Like, isn't that sad? Like that I could think that thought, but then not have the balls to actually break up with him, because it's like, obviously you want an excuse to break up with him. isn't that a good enough excuse?
Yeah.
Right there in and of itself, you know?
Yeah.
But I was settling into mediocrity. And a lot of that is because your beliefs lead to your thoughts lead to your actions, and your actions lead to your results. And I talk about that a lot in the book, is that if you don't have the result that you want, you got to look at your beliefs. So at that time for me, when it came to relationships, for example, my belief was that there's no such thing as a happy, healthy marriage. And that all marriages are kind of like crappy / mediocre / okay. Like, you know, you're supposed to fight, and you're supposed to like feel this like level of angst probably around it. Cause it's like, it's marriage, you know, everyone just kind of like friggin' talks crap about marriage all the time. Yeah. And like, I feel like I constantly heard people be like, marriage is so hard. Marriage is so hard. Marriage is so hard. But people never talked about the reward. They never talked about how worth it was. They never like, I felt like with kids, a lot of times women would be like, having children is like one of the hardest things ever, but it's so rewarding. And I don't have kids, so I can make fun of that, but, or maybe I shouldn't. Maybe that's the reason I shouldn't make fun of it, but whatever.
Right. We have like the last leg up.
Right. I'm like, wait, actually, no, I don't deserve to say that. But so anyone who has kids, you know, we love you.
It's just saying that we always hear.
We just hear that a lot. But I personally just didn't feel like I heard that here. I didn't hear that. Yeah, I didn't hear that about marriage. You know, it was just marriage is hard, period. End of sentence, you know? And so I had to go, you know, I went to therapy. I was working through my limiting beliefs, journaling a lot. I'm huge on journaling. That's why every chapter has journaling prompts to do at the end of each one and action steps to take. Because I just, you know, I had to believe deep down inside of me that there had to be such thing as an amazing marriage. There had to be such thing as living a life that you're like really excited about. I was like, do I have to like keep living like this? Does everything have to be hard? Does everything have to be kind of like, well, that's just the way that it is,
right?
You know, with everything in life. Like, and so for me, because I really started to challenge my thoughts and started to like question, I really started to question everything. Like I started to be like, what is society doing? What am I doing? In what ways am I just adhering to societal norms because that's what I'm supposed to do? You know, it's like you go to high school and everyone starts asking you like, where are you going to college by your junior year? And you're expected to go to college. No one's asking like, oh, do you want to go to college? Like mostly people are saying where, at least for me in my circle, where are you going to college is the question. So you're expected to go to college. Then you go to college, and by junior or senior year, people are saying, where are you going to get a job? What job? What internships are you getting for? Like, and it's expected that you will get like a traditional job, right? When at least, I don't know, I'm like, maybe this is my age group. I'm 30. So I'm like, maybe I'm just
31
older or something, but that's what I experienced. I do think like, I think there might be like a new leaf turning for the younger generation that's currently like in
TikTok
high school
stars.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to be
TikTok star. But then, you know, and then after you graduate from college, I feel like you get a job. And then the next question is like, when are you getting married? And like, where's your boyfriend at? And you start to, you know, just have all this pressure around finding your person. Then you find a person, you start dating, and everyone asks, well, when's the ring coming? Then you get the ring, and then people ask, well, when's the wedding? And then you get the wedding.
Carrot.
Literally.
It never ends.
It never ends. And I just started to get so frustrated and be like, why do I have to do things like the way that they've always been done? Why do I have to keep going on this path that I'm not even excited about? Like, you know, the 6-year boyfriend, I'm like, oh yeah, I should probably get married to him. But then I would picture walking down the aisle, and I would sometimes have like an anxiety attack picturing myself walking down an aisle towards him.
Wow.
Yeah, that's not a good sign.
No. And it just reminded me of a comment that you made in the book where you were saying when you're with the right person, you're not questioning it 50% of the time.
Right. Exactly. And same with your career path. I think if you're in like, you know, career and relationships, they are different, but they're similar in the way that like when you're on the right career path, you are excited about where you're going. And it doesn't mean that, you know, that there aren't hard times or hard days or whatever, but you're excited and you feel purposeful and you feel like I know where I'm headed, and you have a vision for your life. And that's why a big part of my course, Confident Life Academy, is about vision and creating a vision and hope for your future. Because if you don't even know where you're headed in your future, it's so much harder to wake up every day and have that why and that fire underneath you that gets you going. And a lot of people don't want to think about that. And that's what I did for so long. I numbed in mostly healthy ways, you know, social media, staying busy,
right,
constant to-do lists,
right,
drinking occasionally, of course. But like, you know, I think if you're listening right now, really the question that I would have you ask yourself is like, what are the ways you might be numbing instead of spending time sitting with yourself and asking, what am I pretending not to know?
Woo. That's such a good question. And I read that this morning, actually. And I've heard that question before. And so I re-asked it to myself. And it's really clarifying. When you really answer that with like the honest part of you, it's very clarifying, because once you know the answer to that, then you can start to take action. But one thing that, I've had to navigate through in my life is, like you're mentioning, those feelings of not really feeling like you can have a clear vision, not really knowing exactly where you're going. And that can be a really hard time to go through in your life, because if you have nothing that is like exciting you to get out of bed and gets you excited to live your life, you start to lose like the thrill and the adventure of life itself. And, I know that you've experienced some really hard times, and you shared in the book, like I mentioned, like one of the hardest and darkest like thought processes and limiting beliefs that you had to go through was feeling like your life didn't matter, or even this thought that you were going to die early or die young. So can you talk to me a little bit about that? And again, like, I just have to say thank you for being that vulnerable to share that, because I think there's a lot of people that can relate to that. I myself can definitely relate to that. So what helped you break through that limiting belief? And are you able to even identify like where that came from?
Yeah. So like Emily just said, like one of my biggest and darkest limiting beliefs for about 8 years of my life was that I was destined to die young. And I believed that I was supposed to die in a car accident. And it's kind of crazy because I actually journaled. Like I've always pretty much always been a big journaler. And I was reading back to some of my old journals back in like 2014, 2015, 2016, all when I believed this lie. But I never wrote it down anywhere. I never shared it really out loud. I told just a few people. And if I ever told someone, they would kind of freak out and be like, don't say that, Janelle, like that's bad. Like, no,
Wow.
And I actually even had one friend who, and first of all, I did it in totally like I didn't share it in the right context. We were like, we had been drinking. It was late at night. And I'm like, hey, I think I'm supposed to die young. And she probably doesn't even remember this conversation.
Oh my gosh.
And she, we're both, drunk.
Right.
And, like living a life that's, again, just so different from the life that I live now. But, and she was like, yeah, we had a family friend who always thought he was going to die young, and then he did. So I feel like then that was just like confirmation bias, where I was like,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was like, and what's wild is the more I share this on different podcasts and speaking engagements is that, well, two things. One, I found there are so many people who believe they're going to die young, and I get reached out to by people on Instagram and TikTok and whatever all the time of people saying, I've always thought I was going to die young, and I've never told anyone before. You're the first person I'm telling, because you're the only person who's ever talked about it, which is definitely like it's heavy. But what I love about it is that like we're getting the conversation going. And I know that like I've had so many people reach out to me and say like, because you're talking about this, it's actually setting me free from my limiting belief, which is, I just feel like it's such a blessing. And like, I'm a woman of faith. And for me, I'm just like, this is part of my calling that God has placed in my life, is like, yeah, it's to teach women confidence. First and foremost, that's huge for me. I'm a confidence coach. But this isn't just like raw confidence. This is like a deep rooted self-esteem, self-worth type confidence. And it comes to our thought patterns. It comes to our limiting beliefs. And what goes hand in hand with that is like, what are the ways that you're telling yourself that your life doesn't matter? Mine was obviously an extreme, right?
Wow.
Yeah. Mine was an extreme version of my life doesn't matter. I literally think I'm supposed to die. And for some people, it might not be that extreme, but they still have that thought.
Do you have any thoughts? This is just like open-ended, unprocessed conversation now.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts as to why you think so many people are dealing with that right now in today's generation?
I think social media is obviously a big piece of it. Have you seen The Social Dilemma on Netflix?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think about that and how a lot of the stats that they run in that movie or documentary, whatever you call it, was about like high school girls and middle school girls, and the correlation between social media and suicide, which is devastating. I'm kind of curious how much they've done research on women and these types of things. And I say that because it's interesting. A lot of times, like whenever I say I'm a confidence coach, a lot of times people are like, oh, that would be perfect for like middle school and high school girls. And while that's true, and I have spoken for middle school and high school girls, and I love that. And it's cool because it's like, it's not necessarily always preventative, but it could be, like, depending on how young, you know, I get to interact and teach the tools to the girls. But what always makes me sad is how it's like, it's almost like people think that once you become a woman, like once you're like past your mid-20s or something, then all of a sudden you're more confident in who you are.
Right.
And I think people just get better at faking it.
100%. And numbing it. You know, earlier you were talking about numbing, and you were saying like, oh, I used to numb in healthy ways, but it's important to even recognize that even if you are having healthy outlets, that at the end of the day, you have to be self-aware enough to know, am I numbing and am I distracting? Like, you know, I've done a lot of personal work on myself. I've been to therapy. I've done a lot of things, right? And I also have these really incredible daily practices that I do, like working out or meditation, sauna, cold plunge, all these things, right? But I would say it was really quite the important shift for me when I realized that the intention behind those things changed from doing these things because I enjoy them and they're good for me and I want them to be a part of my day, to I have to do this to not feel so much pain. Like I have to do this so I can escape moments of pain.
Wow.
And that realization for me was really huge because it allowed me, it actually not allowed me, it like pushed me to stop doing even these healthy things, because I was like, I have to stop numbing, even if it's healthy. Like I have to stop numbing and I have to face what's here, you know? And what you're mentioning about how people get older and think that that makes them more confident, it's like, no, actually, sometimes people are still those teenage girls trapped inside. So even if you are speaking to the 30, 40-year-old woman, you're sometimes speaking to that 13-year-old version of herself, you know? Because sometimes I wish that we could see like the soul level beyond what's this avatar, the avatar being like the 30, 40-year-old woman, but the soul really being stuck at this like 13-year-old version of herself, you know, who may be the older version of you. By older, I mean the younger, you know, years past, the younger version of you that was struggling and self-harming and, you know, all of these really negative things. And, you know, one thing I want to point out that you mentioned there was how you had different modalities of proving to yourself that your life didn't matter. One being you literally thought you were going to die early, you know? So how can people start to identify where they're having limiting beliefs, right? Because when you're actually going through the process, it's like, this is just true for my life. Like you just think that it's true. So how can people start to identify and start to question, maybe everything that I've thought about myself, maybe that's not actually truth. I
love that. And I'm gonna actually piggyback on one quick thing and then I'll answer the question. I used to be a personal trainer, and that was kind of like when I first moved to California, I was changing my career path. I'm like, okay, I want to help people build their confidence. I'll become a personal trainer. And while I do think, you know, your physical body can help build confidence in a way, I think it's such a small portion of what actually means confidence. And so why I ended up not staying as a personal trainer is because I never felt like I was getting to the root of the problem, because I was helping these women get like awesome bodies, but I was listening to their self-talk and I was listening to how they treat themselves. And I was like, she's still not confident. Like, she's hotter. She's got a better body.
Right.
She likes like how she looks in the mirror more.
Right.
But she still is mean to herself. Her inner dialogue is still crap. Her, you know, like there's still a low self-esteem, you know? And so that's where, and I know the work that you do is like combining both, you know, like, cause you can combine both. It's just that not everyone is always combining both. Like there's a lot of fitness coaches out there that are just only focused on macros and working out and all these things, which again are great and they can help with confidence, but it can't, like, if you are looking to your external world to inform you of your internal world, it's never going to happen. It doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter how hot your body is. It doesn't matter how hot your, you know, boyfriend or your husband is or whatever. If you think that those things are going to bring you happiness and change how you feel about yourself when you wake up in the morning, you're wrong. So you got to work on your internal world. You got to work on how you're talking to yourself. You got to work on, you know, the tools of confidence. And so one of those being becoming aware of the limiting beliefs, like you're saying, and reframing them. And I have a really powerful free workbook that we can link below that walks people through that, because that was for me the awareness of my thoughts and the empowerment to realize that I get to change my thoughts, that I'm choosing my thoughts. Like as I started to realize like I am choosing these thoughts. And I don't know, there's something about, even though that kind of sucks, because you're like, well, I can't like point the finger. I can't be the victim anymore. I can't like blame anyone else. I can't blame my parents. Can't keep going to therapy for years and years and years and talking about my past. No, like you've got to take responsibility for right here and right now. And what are the limiting beliefs you're speaking over yourself every single day, and you're allowing them. And yes, they feel like truth. You know, it's gonna feel like truth. And sometimes there are pieces of truth. So an example of that would be, I was speaking for a company recently, and one of the women, after we did the limiting beliefs and truth exercise that, like I said, is linked below if you want to do it, she was like, well, the problem is that my limiting belief is the truth. And I was like, okay, well, what's your limiting belief? And she was like, well, I work on a team of people that all have 10 to 15 years of experience, and I only have 5 years of experience. So my limiting belief is that I'm not as experienced as everyone else on my team. And that's true because I have less experience. So she's like, you can't just like create your truth and be like, I have as much experience as everyone else on my team. Hurrah. You know, because like your brain's like, you're lying.
Yeah. It's literally a lie.
Literally, you're lying to yourself right now.
Yeah.
So in those circumstances, you get to retrain your mind towards an empowering truth. So for that one, for example, it would be, while I might not have as many years of experience as others on my team, I am an asset to my team because of X, Y, and Z. And because I'm newer, I add fresh perspective, or because I'm newer, and so you find a way to leverage what you have. The same goes for like, you know, there's like the whole age thing. Like if you're younger, you're like, well, I'm too young. And then you get middle-aged, you're like, well, no one likes the middle-aged people, you know? Right. And then you get old and you're like, well, I'm just old. So like, you know, and so we like can literally choose if our age is going to be our asset or if our age is going to be our liability or our, you know, our downfall. And so if you're younger, your mantra is, I'm young, I'm hungry, I have so much to learn. And, you know, like I have fresh eyes, fresh perspective. So I add something to this, you know, maybe more seasoned team or this more, you know, people who are more experienced because I have a fresh perspective. I'm young, you know? And then if you're older, you have wisdom. Yeah, you have years, you know, like, I mean, it's harder for me to even give that one because like, you're literally older. Like that is an asset. But I know that then like what someone who, you know, if you might be in your, I hate saying what older is because people can get really offended, but let's say you're in your 50s or 60s or something like that. And you're in the workforce still, you know, it can be really easy to be like, well, there's all these youngins and like, they know technology better than I do. Like, I don't even like understand Google Drive as much as they do or whatever. Like those things intimidate me more because I wasn't raised on technology. Like these kids were raised on technology. And there's just a lot of things like that come up, which are super valid, you know? So then again, it comes back to like realizing what the strengths are that you have. And that is why I love Strength Finder's personality test. Have you ever taken that one before? Okay. So it's called Gallup, GALLUP, Strength Finders. And it's like $20 or something like that. And you get your top 5 strengths. Oh, cool. And yeah, there's 34 possible strengths. And like the likelihood of you getting the same top 5 strengths as someone else who has taken this test, which like millions of people have taken this test, it's like 0.000000001% chance because of like the layout of how many strengths there are. So it's just cool to have that, like to focus on the positive psychology, especially I think as women, we a lot of times think about like all the things that we aren't good at and all the ways we do fall short. So I think like one great way to overcome a limiting belief is to actually start to celebrate the things that make you, the things that are strengths in you. And to read through those personality tests, at least for me, it like pumps me up. I'm like, okay, this is who I am. Like, this is who God created me to be. Like I'm uniquely and wonderfully made. Like, this is amazing. And celebrate what you do have, and then be willing to acknowledge the things that maybe aren't your, you know, my husband and I, Frankie, we call them our lesser strengths. We're like, we have our lesser strengths, you know, like
that's so cute.
Patience is my lesser strength.
That's awesome.
Can I work on it? Yes. And am I working on it? Yes, always. And it just might never be quite my, you know, it's not a natural strength for me. Like we have natural strengths as humans, and then we have things that are a little bit less natural for us and we can grow in those. But instead of spending all of your time thinking, how can I grow in the things that I'm not as good at? What if you were to hone in on the strengths that are more natural to you and like own them like a boss, you know?
Yes. Oh my gosh. There are so many golden nuggets in there that I want to pull out. I probably won't even remember all of them, But one overarching just kind of idea and thing that I want to bring out is, earlier we were talking about people who have imposter syndrome, who feel like they aren't there yet. We talked about the dangling carrot, right? And here you talked about how when you're young, you're like, well, I'm not old enough. And when you're old, you're like, well, all these youngins, right? Again, it's that dangling carrot in a different kind of way. So what I'm hearing just throughout this entire podcast is that there is so much power in accepting where you're at on your journey for right now today, knowing full well that you have literally everything that you need inside of you to show up today. Yes, to show up to that business meeting that you're scared of because there's all these high-level CEOs, to show up to that podcast, to start writing chapter 1 of your book. You literally have every single ingredient that you need to show up for today, the Tuesday in January, right? And so I think really empowering yourself with that truth to say, yeah, you know what? Maybe I'm not where I'll be in 10 years. Hopefully not.
Right.
But like I'm exactly where I need to be in order to get there. Like in order to get to where you're going, you got to be right where you're at today. And once you realize that, you get away from this lack mentality of, oh, I don't have enough, or I've missed my time, or whatever the limiting belief is, right? And you can step into abundance and acceptance and surrender where you're actually at and allow those gifts and talents to come out, knowing full well, like you said, like what you mentioned, how it's such a small percentage of a chance that you could match with all top 5 strengths of someone else. Does that not show you that every single person in the room has so much value to offer, and that if you don't speak up, no one's going to know, no one's going to have that gift. Like you're the only person with that gift. So I think it's really empowering, to use, your word, to choose a different belief. And again, like you mentioned, it's not this fake rah-rah confidence thing where we lie to ourselves. It's what is the empowering version? What is the empowering perspective, in choosing to step into that? So going into, talking about scarcity mindset versus abundant mindset, it's something that you speak about in your book. What changed for you when you started to adopt this abundant mentality, and how did that differ from before when you had maybe the scarcity type of mindset?
Yeah. Oof. I love this question. And I want to say about the limiting beliefs, if anyone is listening and you are working through the workbook below and you can't figure out what the truth is because your limiting belief feels so strong in your mind, feel free to DM me on Instagram. I've been lately going through and just answering everyone's limiting beliefs. And I actually have a whole highlight reel now on my Instagram that shows people's limiting beliefs and then the truth response in affirmation form. So affirmations for you to be speaking out loud over yourself every single day. For me, I believe affirmations are meant to be out loud in front of the mirror, looking at yourself, because the way that you were told a lot of these things were in the, when someone was looking at you. And so for you to look at yourself while you do it, it's a really powerful ritual. And again, out loud is really powerful as well. And that's a really incredible way to create a new neural pathway in your mind. So right now you've created a neural pathway, which basically what that means is if you think about a pasture or green grass, you walked the same green grass pathway over and over and over again, saying I'm not that smart. I'm not smart enough yet. I'm not that smart. Whatever it is that is your, limiting belief. But for me, that was one of them for a long time. You've said that to yourself 1,000 times. You looked for ways to confirm it. So if your teacher was ever oh, you ask a lot of questions, you're see, there you go. It's because I'm dumb. It's because I'm not that smart. And so you looked for ways to confirm it. Your coworker makes a little comment. They might not even mean anything by it. But what you're hearing is, I'm not that smart. Wow. So you walked that pathway 1,000 times. You created that pathway. In order to then create a new pathway, you have to start saying a new truth and looking for ways to confirm that truth. So then you think about how you have this grass path, you're going the opposite direction of the one that you already created. So you create this new path and you have to start walking it over and over and over again. And that's why my book is called Flex Your Confidence Muscle, because building confidence is a muscle. So you've got to keep over and over and over again putting in the work, because it's not just necessarily a one and done, I'm smart. I feel so awesome. Smart now.
Right.
Right. You actually get to keep repeating it over yourself every single day, and usually attaching more meaningful words to it too, to an affirmation to make it really solidify in your heart. And then look for ways to confirm it. So if your friend or your boss or your husband or whoever it is says something kind to you and builds you up, instead of rejecting that compliment and being oh, I don't know, not really, who, me, or whatever it is. We do a plethora of different ways of basically rejecting people's compliments. You you get to do exactly what you did earlier, which I loved, which is I received that. And simply say, I received that. And sit in that compliment. Don't even try to compliment the person back. That's one of my biggest pet peeves.
Same.
Oh, it's the worst. I'm like,
because it feels ingenuine.
it's so ingenuine. Yeah, like it's like I just gave you a present and then you're like, oh, let me look in my purse. I found this
Here's
pen.
a pen.
Yeah.
I love it.
We're so aligned. I love it.
I know.
We're in each other's brains. Yeah, it's like, here's this pen I just got you. Like, you're like, bro, you did not just give me that pen. Like,
Whose initials are those?
that is not my initials.
Yeah.
So it just feels like a weird present that didn't really belong. So just like when someone compliments you, take the compliment and just say, I receive it. And add it to your like little toolbox of things of like that you like about yourself and things that you love about yourself, and use that to confirm the truth of like, I'm smart or I'm lovable or I'm enough. Like use it as a way to confirm that, you know?
That's so good. And to help highlight your strengths.
Yeah.
You know, because when you are able to hear that from other people, it can really highlight something to you that maybe you know, but again, you can just use it as something to really build yourself up. So I love that. And also just remembering that receiving, number one, it's a really incredible thing for you to practice in your life. But number two, it also is a gift to the giver. Like no one likes giving a gift that's just kind of shoved back to them.
Right.
You know, like you try to give someone this gift and they just shove it across the table back at you and you're like, okay.
Yeah, I just picked that out for you, but
Yeah.
I guess you don't want it. Yeah, it makes the other person feel less loved too. Yeah, it like blocks the flow of energy of like loving each other. Yeah.
Exactly. And then it's like you wonder why you're not experiencing these deep connections that you're really seeking in your life. And it may be because you have all of these blocks and walls up. And if you would actually just let some of those down and be open to receiving with an open heart, open mind, you would be able to create those connections that you're desiring. So,
which actually goes into the abundance question, which I'll say quickly because you did ask that, and then I kind of like skirt went in a different direction.
okay.
But it's all having that abundance is really about being able to give and receive. And most of the women I work with, to be honest, generally don't struggle with giving. They're often like really empathetic women who are just like really good givers, you know? Because a lot of times I think that's where, you know, people who sometimes struggle with confidence is because they're so busy giving to everyone else, they forget to give to themselves.
So true.
And so for most of you listening, I would probably be willing to bet that for you, abundance looks like you actually learning how to receive instead of constantly being the giver, and not having to feel like something's wrong with you for having to receive something or for asking for help. I know.
Asking for help is probably one of the hardest things that I have had to overcome in my own life. And I haven't overcome it. Like I'm still trying to practice that. Like, and I've recognized some areas. It's funny when you need to grow in an area of your life, God will give you so many opportunities to practice it, right? So I even had like some friends reach out and say, hey, if you ever needed this, you know, I'm here. And I'm like, okay, thanks. And in my head, I'm like, I need it, but I can't say it. And then they message again a second time. Like, okay, fine, I see you.
Fine.
Yes. you know, so yeah, can you speak to me? Can you speak to people that
the audience
really needs this, to people that struggle to ask for help? What would you say to them to help them starting to practice this in their lives, or to be more open-minded to it, or maybe to have a different perspective with it? Like, what can you share to those people, you know, that we don't know? My friends.
We don't. Yeah. Her over there.
Yeah.
I think the first thing that comes to my mind, I love Brene Brown, and she says clear is kind and unclear is unkind. And so when you start to shift your mindset into realizing that asking someone for help is actually a way of you being kind to them, because you're being clear about your expectations. Because what often happens in these situations where maybe you're always the giver, but you're almost never the receiver. First of all, that is a way to not be vulnerable. So therefore you don't feel as connected to people. And then you end up feeling lonelier. And so you're doing a disservice to your friends because they want to be close to you. And I actually used to do stuff like this where like I would hang out with people and I would ask them a bunch of questions about their life, but I would never like pause long enough to let them ask me about my life. And I started to realize it was a protection mechanism that was stopping me from ever having to open up about how I was doing.
Totally.
And so I was like, okay, Janelle, like you've got to stop asking so many questions. Like and then what would happen, again, why this is a disservice to them is because then they feel so connected to me and I don't feel connected to them. And how is that going to be a great long-term friendship? It's not. Because then I'm going to end up probably over time, like a lot of times what happens for people is like resentment starts to build because your needs are never being met. And a lot of times then one day you're like detached from that friendship or from that relationship because you're like, well, it's all subconscious because obviously you mean well when you say, I'm good, I don't need anything. But again, over like months and years of that buildup of like you constantly giving to other people or you constantly listening to other people, but never getting to talk yourself, never getting to share about yourself. Those are ways that you end up being like energetically drained and feel disconnected and lonely. And you think you're doing them, you think you're being nice to them, but you're not being nice. They want to be connected to you.
Wow.
They want to feel connected. By you putting up your walls and not receiving from them, yeah, again, you think it's just, there's no other better way to say that. You think you're being nice, but you are not being nice. You're actually being mean and you're blocking the other person from getting to know you. And you're blocking a symbiotic relationship where the flow, like I don't know why, but I always think about like a ping pong game. And I'm like, it's a ping pong, like back and forth. And that, like a friendship, a relationship, everything should feel like ping pong. Like the ball can't stay on one side of the court for forever. It must go back and forth. So that goes for conversations. Like if someone's dominating the conversation or if someone's asking too many questions, like, who's taught, like give both parties time to talk. Yeah. And the same goes for like giving, it's like, if you've given a few times for them, don't feel weird asking because this is a ping pong game. Like, and it's not about tit for tat or I gave you $10, so now you give me $10. It's not like that, but it is just realizing that you're valuable enough to receive and that you're worth that.
I think that's what it is too. I think a lot of people, like at the beginning of your book, right? You said, I felt incredibly undeserving of a life like this. And I think a lot of people feel undeserving, unworthy, and unworthiness is something that I think we deal with a lot just in general. So how do you start to realize that you are worthy?
Ooh, that's such a good,
question.
That's a great deep question. I mean, obviously my first thought is like getting to those lies, but I think, for me, again, some of it comes back to faith and just realizing like my creator doesn't make mistakes. And every single person on this planet is deserving because worth is innately set inside of each one of us. Like the second you're born, you see a brand new baby. It's not like you're like, oh, they're unworthy, like, or they're not enough. Like,
oh my gosh, it's so true.
Like it's precious. It's new life. Has the whole world in front of us or in front of it. And we have the whole world in front of us. And so worth is innately set inside. It's more about like getting all the lies off of you that you're allowing to tell you aren't like, that makes you unworthy, but you've created those. And again, like I think that there is spiritual warfare where there's like light and dark and like there's like dark stuff that's like attacking, that's like trying to make you feel unworthy and to make you speak these things over yourself and to think you're supposed to die young in a car accident. Like these dark spirits are at play. And I know I'm getting real heavy for some of you. And so you might be like, oh gosh, now this girl's...
They're used to this.
Yeah. Okay,
fine.
Perfect.
Send it.
Send it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I talk about this in my book around like the deliverance that I actually experienced from the lie that I was supposed to die in a car accident. And when you get deliverance, you can actually have instant freedom from lies that have been attacking you for so many years because you're literally getting like these dark spirits out of you and God is like fully setting you free. Wow. So I think some of it, like, again, it's a spiritual thing. Like I can't like take God fully out of it because I think that like when we look at like our self-worth, it's innately set inside of us because we have a creator who loves us intensely and insanely. And like, it's really just up to us again to receive that love because you can be loved by your parents, but if you don't receive the love and you don't love yourself, it doesn't do anything. You could be loved by your friends. You can be loved by your boss. You could be loved by your, boyfriend. Like, but if you don't love yourself, none of that actually matters. And if you don't receive the love, it doesn't matter. So
good. A few things I want to point out here is, and I just really want to like hone in on this. Number one, everyone listening, you were literally born worthy. You were born worthy. Like that is your nature. That's who you are. So I think something that can help is really identifying who and what told me that I was unworthy. Like really asking yourself that question. And also having the understanding that if we come from God, if we come from the ultimate source of love and we are a piece of him, we are love itself, then what voice is telling us that we're unworthy?
Wow.
Where are these thoughts? Where are they coming from? Because if they're not coming from God, where is it coming from? And I think that can help people, regardless of where you're at in your belief, to really identify just the simple question, does this thought come from God? The ultimate loving essence, does it come from him? And if not, start to look into that. Maybe start to look into deliverance. Maybe start to look into these different things, your limiting beliefs, right? Like choosing new thought patterns and new beliefs for your life. So I think what you're sharing is just very applicable no matter where people are at in their journey and what they believe, because I think these are all things that we as humans just deal with. So, wow.
Wow, that was so powerful.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. I'm I'm like, great. So when's your book coming out? Let's go.
TBD. So, okay, speaking of, so I get through your book, right? I'm reading this and, you know, the romantic in me is like, oh my gosh, okay, so she left this 6-year relationship that she knew wasn't serving her. She's living this beautiful life with her husband. I'm waiting for when you tell us about this romantic story in your book, and you never tell us. I'm on this
gosh. Wait.
So my question is, when does your love story book come out?
Oh my gosh.
When does that come out? Because
Wait.
I want to read about that. I want to read about what it's like to meet somebody like that. What is that relationship like? You know, because you mentioned it's not the person when you're questioning it 50% of the time, when you're experiencing X, Y, and Z. So what does that experience look like? And what does this experience feel like? Wow. And how did you go from a person that doesn't believe that marriage could be happy, that it's just hard? Like that's the belief that I feel like a lot of people have. It's hard. It kind of sucks. You kind of put up with each other and you learn to live with it. Right.
Yeah.
So how do you go from that to like this version? And you know, you can, if you want to share anything right now, you can.
Yeah, I'll share.
But I also just want the book.
Flex your relationship muscle.
Yeah.
Wow, I actually never thought about how I left people totally on a
I was dying. This morning I was like, where is it?
I'm sorry. You know what's hilarious is that I told my husband literally yesterday after finishing my launch for my new course, Confident Life Academy. I was like, I feel like my next course is going to be about relationships.
Yes.
So it's funny that you're saying this about the book. That's good. That's good confirmation. And just so we don't leave everyone on a cliffhanger for like until the course or the book is live, because that could be a few months. So yeah, I mean, the journey didn't go just from like breaking up with my 6-year boyfriend to 1 year later meeting the love of my life.
Right.
It's actually like this whole journey of realizing that I wasn't the person that my dream man would be attracted to. Oof. Oof. And that's all. No, I'm just joking.
Yeah.
And so I had to learn how to become the person that I like, because I had all these lists of what I was looking for. And I just remember the moment. I literally can think about the stoplight I was at. I lived in Fort Collins, Colorado. I can picture the stoplight I was at on Elizabeth with the Qdoba right there. And I was like, your dream man wouldn't be interested in you.
Wow.
And it sucked. It was like a slap in the face. And I'm like, the way that you party all the time, you're such a flirt, like the way that you like interact with men, like you are not like this man of high caliber. Like, anyway, so then it was kind of this whole journey of like, I don't believe in becoming someone for someone else, but I will say it was motivation for me to be like, I want to become the best version of myself and be so obsessed with my life that I look next to me and see who else is crushing it. And that's the person that I'll marry. Because before, I think I was just looking for my guy to like bring me happiness, if I'm honest. Like, I feel like I was raised in a town that was a little bit smaller. So I feel like everyone just kind of like got married at like 22, 23, like everyone just like, and I was breaking up with my 6-year boyfriend at 22. So I was like freshly single at the time that most people were getting married. So I was like, maid of honor numerous times, always single, you know, and it was really hard. And so I kept for a couple of years there, like right after the 6-year relationship, I kept hoping, because I would hear people's stories. They'd be like, I broke up with him, and then like 2 months later, my person appeared, you know, and you're like, okay, yes, claiming that for me.
Right.
And so I kept trying to claim that for me, and then kept trying to force other relationships to work that weren't the right things, because again, I wasn't the right person. And so like you will attract someone who is like who you are. And so there was a reason why I attracted the person that I was in the 6-year relationship with. Again, very nice guy, great guy, but not my person by far. And there was a reason why I kept attracting people who weren't the right kind of person, because I wasn't the right kind of person.
That's so good. And I think it's really empowering. Like, yes, that can be a really hard reality and truth to look at. And I'm sure a lot of people listening are like, damn it, that's me right now, but like it can also be an empowering tool to push you to the best version of yourself. And then when you are that best version of yourself, like you mentioned, you're going to attract what you are emanating out from you. So, okay, I know we've gone a little bit over today, but I just want to thank you so much for your time and just your willingness to share the good, the bad, and everything in between, because it really is just so helpful to have a real picture of what life can look like, what confidence can look like, and what living in your purpose can look like with, the imperfections and all. So thank you for your time. And where can people find out about you? And do you have any programs or coaching opportunities that you want to share with them?
Yeah. Well, thank you again for having me, and for everyone who's listened to this whole time. I feel like you and I are like vibing off each other so much that we're moving like 1,000,000 miles an hour.
I know.
And I'm not
Are
gonna
they
lie.
keeping up?
I know. I'm like, well, I'm sure they're keeping up, but I'm sure there's some loops that haven't been closed. Like I can already tell. I'm like a loop closer. Like I like to close loops. I'm like, there's like at least 10 loops we did not close in this podcast. So I'm sorry. Maybe we'll have to do a part 2 or something so we can close all the loops in your mind.
Yeah.
But you're incredible at this. You're so fun. You're so thoughtful. Thank you for reading my book before. Like a lot of podcasts I've been on, they don't actually I think they skim the book. They don't like read it. Like I just saw the book you have like literally you're highlighted all the way through, underlines, like all that. I'm like, let's go. Yes. So thank you for just being so authentic and showing up so meaningfully and so present. Like I'm really impressed by you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So where you can find me, I am on TikTok and Instagram at Janelle_Lynnae. And let's see what else. I mean, there's my book. There's Flex Your Confidence Muscle. It's available on Amazon. I don't have my Audible out yet. People have been asking about that. So that's coming very soon. And then as far as coaching goes, the number one opportunity right now would be joining Confident Life Academy. And so you can come over to my Instagram and learn about it. My link in bio always has everything there. Or you can go to my website, which is nextlevelconfident.com. And then the other thing is I speak for companies. So if anyone's listening and you have a women's employee resource group, I speak for a lot of tech companies, for example, maybe for sales kickoffs, things like that. So if you work for a company that has a women's group and you bring in outside speakers, I love getting to speak for, women. I think a lot of times we don't have these type of conversations as often in the workplace. And so it's really beautiful when we get to have these kind of conversations with colleagues and with coworkers, because it breaks down walls, and you spend so much time with these people that you really want to have a common language and be able to call each other out and be like, hey, that was a limiting belief. I just heard you speak over yourself. And so that's what a lot of times when I speak for companies, that's what people will tell me afterwards. It's like, wow, we have a common language of how we can support each other better now to be more confident in the workplace. So, so those are kind of all the opportunities, but otherwise I would just love, if you guys love this podcast, DM me on Instagram. I always love hearing from people. And if you're dealing with limiting beliefs or dark thoughts, again, reach out and get help, whether it's from one of us or from a professional, but don't let your dark thoughts keep ruminating by yourself, because what I can tell you is that the second you bring them out into the light, that's how they lose their power. But if you just try to do it all alone, it's going to be a really hard journey. So I just really, whether it's us or maybe it's a friend or a spouse or whatever, but just bring your darkest, most vulnerable limiting beliefs out into the light, and they'll start to lose their power. And that's what, if you get nothing else from this, I just really hope that you get that from this podcast.
I loved this podcast. That was so powerful.
I loved it too.
All right, guys, you know the drill. If you enjoyed today's show, please do us a favor and tag us on your Instagram stories. You can send this to a friend. Help share the message of the show simply by just sharing the show itself. Thank you guys, and I will see you in the next episode of Evolve with Emily. Bye, everyone.
Bye.